Why do societies start turning everything into us versus them? In this explainer, we'll look at what nationalism actually is, how it shapes the way societies see themselves, and why it keeps reappearing in modern politics and public life. By the end, you'll be able to recognize when identity stops being just a belief and starts becoming something that structures power in everyday life. Nationalism is an ideology that defines political belonging in terms of a shared national identity. It tells people who belongs, who does not, and who the state claims to represent. In other words, nationalism doesn't just describe how people feel about a country. It creates a boundary around who counts as part of the political community. That boundary exists in every political system. Nationalism simply defines it through identity, rather than through law, participation, or performance. Every society needs some sense of we. That is normal. It is how people cooperate, build institutions, and live together. Nationalism becomes powerful when that shared identity starts doing political work. Instead of asking whether institutions are fair, competent, or effective, people are encouraged to ask whether someone is one of us. Belonging begins to matter more than results. At that point, identity stops being just cultural. It becomes political infrastructure. This is why nationalism is so useful to power. It creates loyalty without needing constant performance. It creates solidarity even when people disagree. And it creates moral boundaries that feel stronger than formal rules. Nationalism does not replace government. It supports it, by giving people a reason to remain emotionally attached to a system, even when that system is under strain. Nationalism doesn't operate on its own. It works because multiple systems are already in place and reinforcing one another. From Module 1, nationalism draws on perception and narrative. Shared stories about history, identity, and belonging shape how people see themselves and others. Without those narratives, there is no emotional we to mobilize. It also relies on mass behavior and social psychology. In-group loyalty, conformity, and social pressure make identity feel collective rather than individual. People don't just believe, they align because others around them do too. From Module 2, nationalism connects directly to legitimacy. When trust in institutions weakens, identity becomes a substitute source of authority. Power no longer asks, "Do you trust this system?" It asks, "Are you one of us?" As systems strain further, governance and social control begin to lean on that identity. Rules are justified in the name of the nation. Criticism is reframed as disloyalty, and belonging starts to matter more than process. Seen together, nationalism is not a single belief. It is the point where perception, behavior, legitimacy, and governance converge into one reinforcing system. That is what gives it such staying power, and why it reliably reappears when societies are under pressure. Nationalism becomes most powerful when societies start to feel uncertain and fragile. When people lose trust in institutions, when economic systems feel unfair, and when the future becomes harder to predict, something important changes. Rules and policies start to feel abstract, but identity still feels real. Belonging is something people can hold on to when everything else seems unstable. So nationalism fills the gap. It offers a simple story, a clear boundary, and a sense of meaning. This is why nationalism tends to rise during moments of crisis, disruption, and rapid change. Not because people suddenly become extreme, but because systems and societies are looking for something that still holds. There are clear signs when nationalism is no longer just a feeling and starts shaping how a system works. Politics becomes more about identity than policy. Loyalty begins to matter more than competence. Criticism is increasingly treated as betrayal rather than disagreement. History and national symbols are used to define what is acceptable, and complex problems are explained through simple stories about us and them. These patterns can appear inside any political system, including democracies. They signal that identity is starting to replace trust as the glue that holds society together. Nationalism is often described as love of country, but in systems terms, it is something more specific. It is what happens when belonging starts doing the work that trust used to do. That does not make nationalism evil, but it does make it powerful. And in times of stress, the most powerful ideas are always the ones that feel simplest. So the real question isn't whether people feel proud of their nation. It's whether belonging has started to replace trust. Do you see that happening where you live? And if so, in which direction is it moving? And this concept connects directly to perception, narrative control, mass behavior, legitimacy, and totalitarianism across this series. This is TNBC Explainers, understanding how the world actually works. Nationalism is part of TNBC Explainers Module 2. Power, Governance, and the State. TNBC Explainers is a growing YouTube course. New concepts are added over time,